people's hearts and to transform their hearts. And there's nothing you can really do to transform people's hearts and minds. So that's actually a point about that way God is glorified and not us. So it's these small steps of faith that God uses to lead us into bigger steps of faith. And Matthew 25:21 says, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master." That's one of the fill-ins. When we are faithful with little, we will be faithful with much, or many things. So God doesn't expect you to instantly become like a very charismatic and huge heart, loving people, encouraging people, and just taking big steps of faith where it's like, I mean, you may have heard stories about this, like maybe people who have no money and they just go to missions and they just expect God's going to provide, or they jump out of a plane and it's like, all right, God, you're my parachute, I'm going to jump. That's actually pretty dumb. Maybe you can pray that if you don't have enough money, God will provide a parachute for you to jump out, but don't jump out without a parachute. So God wants us to take those small steps of faith. And at the end of your life, God is going to judge if you've actually taken those steps that God has revealed to you, or if you just turned the other way. What if God judged you today about the steps of faith that you are taking or the ones that you're avoiding? Would you enter into the joy of your master? So to conclude this section about inadequacies or perceived inadequacies that hold us back, I'd like to actually use the life of Paul as an example to study. Paul was completely inadequate. He was late to the show. He missed out on all the teachings and miracles of Jesus. He missed out on the death and resurrection of Christ. He even missed the Holy Spirit coming at Pentecost. And he missed that by 4 years. And in that 4 years, he was killing and persecuting Christians the whole time. And so Paul had the worst faith, and he was a terrible example. Paul was also terrible at ministry, and he actually actively sought to destroy ministry. Yet God still revealed himself to Paul and used Paul for God's glory. So Paul took small steps of faith. He went to the temple to pray. He sought wise counsel from prophets until God finally answered Paul, and God revealed himself to Paul. And Paul gives God all the glory by explaining how it's clearly not his own work, but completely the wonderful works of God. The wonderful works of God in him. And just look at how much God revealed to Paul through just the formative theology of Romans. So much of the Christian faith draws on Paul's revelation from God. He just knew things that even the disciples didn't, who walked with Jesus, who saw the miracles, who were there at the death and resurrection of Christ. Paul he missed out, but God still used him. And if God can use a huge sinner like Paul, then of course he can use us for his glory. And it's stupid to think that our inadequacies are greater than God's redeeming power. So those are my first 2 points about inadequacies and just ministry tips. So the last point is actually putting it all together and talking about how faithfulness is a part of all aspects of our lives. And I'm going to actually illustrate this concept by talking about how I've been faithful to God at work. And I'm also going to explain about how following God is not about giving up good things, but it's actually about putting in even more amazing things instead of those good things. So the first thing I wanted to address was the fear of falling behind your peers. Hopkins has always been a competitive place, and it's always going to be that way. And it's natural to look around and see what everyone else is doing. And yes, a life of faith will cost you. And it will make you fall behind in some categories, but not all categories. But those ways you give up, the ways that cost you, that's what it means to take up your cross daily. And that's what it looks like to carry each other's burdens. So I actually remember, so Phil Yang was our former pastor, and Andrew Kim. To describe Andrew Kim, I'll just say he was a guy that was like on fire for God in our church. He's actually in the back right now. And they actually gave this message about, and at the beginning they showed this video clip of Saving Private Ryan where they're storming the beach on D-Day, and you just see people just getting blown up, like their arms are getting blown up, like there's like one guy where his like intestines are like falling out. It's crazy. So I think it's actually these cinematic experiences. I mean, like they're designed to do this, but they're like kind of like seared into your memory where you can remember all the things that happened. And I remember just seeing all that loss, and I think that message was related to giving up things for God. And actually, I feel like that's actually a wrong idea to have. I don't even know if that was a point that was being made. See, I only remember the movie. I don't even remember the point being made at that sermon. So I don't think that's what it looks like serving God in ministry. I don't think we give up a part of ourselves and are forever disabled, forever behind our peers, and never able to catch up to them. But living a life of faith is a joyful sacrifice, and that's the feeling. Difficulties of ministry are a joyful sacrifice. Yes, Jesus. We give up things in the short term, but we gain so much more in the long term. And infinitely more in the eternal term. So that's actually another fill-in. It builds us up for later and eternity. Ministry challenges us to have meaningful relationships. And the effort you put into building meaningful relationships overflows into all the future relationships you will have. Being in ministry teaches you how to love and teaches you how to love well. And being in ministry has actually taught me how to be a loving boyfriend and eventually how to be a loving husband and father. I know, it's so cute, right? And you know, I talk about Alice, so some of you guys know more about what I'm talking about, and you know, I think I'm a pretty good boyfriend. And I will argue that ministry actually makes you a better boyfriend. Assuming you have enough time for the relationship. That's like a huge caveat right there. And this is actually off the record. I wasn't planning on speaking about this, but I felt God leading me to share this. So I can get it past the pastors. Because I reviewed this with them, but now they can't review this because I'm speaking.
He's going rogue.
He's going rogue. But yeah, so relationships actually teach you a lot about how to love and priorities. And it's related back to that, you know, that point about time management. It's about, you know, priorities and just the way you spend your time. So you need to learn how to prioritize your significant other. But you also learn about not prioritizing that above God. And completely off the record, ministry may cause you to have a boyfriend or girlfriend. But we can.
What is going on?
Okay, there are a lot of big asterisks here. So
What is going on?
this is we'll have to talk about this at a meetup, not at a message.
Dude, Richard's like dead.
All right, moving on. Okay. That's the end of the excitement, guys. I just put this at the end to make sure you're still awake because it's like 70% through, so it's finishing up. So I know what it looks like to have meaningful relationships with non-Christians as well, because I understand the value in people, and being in ministry grew my heart for loving others. And seeking God through all circumstances has also taught me how to make it through any tough circumstance, knowing that God will be walking close to me through anything, and also knowing how to also walk with God through times of abundance, and being thankful for everything that God has provided. It's really easy to fall into unloving, uncaring, ungiving, and just being a really selfish person, especially when everything in your life is going according to your own perfect plan. But allowing God to interrupt your perfectly selfish plans is how God can steer you away from the path of destruction. So Matthew 6:19-21 says, "Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and vermin destroy and where thieves break in and steal, but store up for yourselves treasures in heaven where moth and vermin do not destroy and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." So don't think about seeking God as forever giving up a part of yourself. Instead, think of it like, like the joyful sacrifice. Think of it as, it's actually, I think the point about like working out actually is a good point here, where you can think about it like working out, because in the short term, after you work out really hard, you'll be tired, you'll be sore, and you will be weaker in the short term. But in the long term, you're building up so much more strength. So in conclusion, you can be shredded or buff for Jesus and do amazing things through the power of Christ. That's the conclusion. So lastly, I'm going to talk specifically about work, and this is like the last thing I was going to talk about, just faith in work. So a lot about what I'm sharing tonight is a lot about how I'm saying like, oh, you got to like be in it for the long term, be patient and faithful. So I'm just going to share with you like how I know this is true. So at first there were two convictions from God, where God was calling me to use my gifts to reach out to the city of Baltimore. And I'm really passionate about teaching and building things, so I wanted to reach out to kids in Baltimore through educational outreach programs and just share my passion with kids in Baltimore. And this conviction actually began junior year, so this has been a long time going. And things were actually pretty difficult and slow. I tried a lot of different things over the last 4 years, and most of the time there wasn't much results. And I actually had to spend so much time and energy just encouraging people to help out. And later there was another conviction about getting college students involved in reaching out to Baltimore and getting students to leave the Hopkins bubble. And again, it's a long and slow process, with me feeling like it's just difficult to find students who actually care about serving the city of Baltimore. And the numbers are small, but I've come to realize that it's not about the numbers. It's about God bringing who he will bring. So I've stopped focusing on the results and instead focused on just being faithful to what God has called me to do. Don't look around and be discouraged, but just be faithful to where God is calling you. That's one of the points. Don't look around and be discouraged. Just be faithful to where God is calling you. And I don't care what other people will do, but it doesn't mean that I'm going to stop encouraging people to serve Baltimore. I'm just not going to take that burden on myself to transform people, because only God can transform people's hearts and minds. And I think it's this attitude of patience and faithfulness that God has been able to use me to do things and just keeping on going, beyond what I could even imagine, where I know it's not me, and I know it's not what I'm doing. So the third conviction was actually reaching out to coworkers, and this was actually another long and slow process. And we had a small group for 1 year where we read the book Every Good Endeavor by Tim Keller, and Josiah's shaking his head because Josiah knows there were some challenges associated with this book and small group. The book was about how God created us to work and how God should actually be part of our work and part of our careers. So it's actually good in theory, but actually really difficult to practice. So most people in our small group got really frustrated. Just because you want to go all out for God and you want to evangelize to everyone, but you also want to keep your job and not get fired. So I think there's that holds people back. But So sometimes it just felt like God wasn't moving there. And I will say that, things weren't really moving, but there are actually like little fruits of encouragement that I think God was using to continue to give us strength to keep continuing in faithfulness, to keep reaching out to coworkers, even though it seems like nothing's happening, and to keep like just keep going, even though there's some discouragements. And even there was this one point where some of my coworker friends left the company, and it was really discouraging. But then I feel like God just provided some fruit. Like there's some coworkers that actually came to church with me, and that was encouraging. And then they left, so I was sad. But then that was actually them leaving actually opened up like a hole for like something else to be there. And I feel like it's actually those little fruits of encouragement that like kept me faithful to keep going. Because if I saw nothing, I think it would be really hard to keep going. So God was actually preparing the soil, planting the seeds, and watering the soil, all in the background. And so this next phase is actually talking about seeing the blooming and seeing the fruit and the flowers. So early on, I actually invited a lot of coworkers to go rock climbing because I love rock climbing and I taught people how to do that. And I was like, this is like a waste of time. And I just moved on. I stopped rock climbing because I got lazy. It's also expensive to go rock climbing. So I took a break from rock climbing. But then I got back into rock climbing. And in this getting back into rock climbing, I realized there's actually this huge rock climbing community at work, and they just have this group chat, and they go multiple times a week, and they're like, hey Peter, you want to go rock climbing? And I was like, why are all these people going rock climbing at work? I mean, no one was going rock climbing. I was trying to teach people how to go rock climbing, and now people are trying to teach me how to rock climb. I was like, what's going on? So it just turns out that those people who I took rock climbing, just really love rock climbing as well, and they just started up this rock climbing community at work, and that's just where it was just an encouragement to me to see how something that I thought was not doing anything, God was actually developing in the background. And there's actually a lot of valuable relationships that I have now that I was just meeting up with people. I went fishing with this one dude, and I'm just I just feel like I just went fishing with this dude for no apparent reason. It's just I went to his farm and we were fishing in his pond. He actually taught me how to catch fish, which was really cool. I've never caught a fish before. Maybe this is... Okay, never mind. I feel like I make these over-spiritualized connections. I was going to be like, fishers. Oh, man, Jesus. But I don't think that was the point. That wasn't the point. The point was that this relationship that I thought was doing nothing actually turned into later on, over the years, he went through a lot of life transitions and and then at some point he reached out to me. He's like, yo, could you pray for me for this? I'm going back to church. My fiance, who I'm gonna propose to, is wanting me to go to church. So knowing that I was there for him actually allowed this to later on turn into a discipling relationship where we actually meet up every week now, and I'm always encouraging him, and seeing him grow is really encouraging to just be doing discipleship at work. It's just I never thought I'd be doing anything like that, because that's usually why would you do discipleship at work? What, are you crazy? Maybe I am. But I also get poured into at work because in some of these meetups, there's this really faithful secretary who she just prays for people. She actually gave me a pamphlet where she said she's a prayer warrior and she's praying for me for Baltimore missions. Yeah, I've really been blessed by these, I call them senior citizen Christians, who just are so faithful. They've been faithful for 50 plus years, and I've just been blessed by getting to know them and them praying for me. And sometimes they'll just speak prophetic and very deep insight into me. I'm yo, how do you even know that? How do you know that this is what I'm going through? How do you know that's the prayer that I needed? And I think it's just they've been walking with God for so long, and they intimately know God. And I've been encouraged by them at work. And even there's other, beyond that, there's just all these relationships. So God was really preparing the soil. Even my boss and the CEO, they've all been blessing me in different ways that I'm just sitting back what the heck is going on right now? And it's crazy. There's just too much to talk about, but basically God has been doing so much at work. And a lot of it I didn't even see until I finally saw things starting to bloom. And I think just seeing that blooming has been giving me extra faith and energy. Right now I feel I have tons of faith and energy just seeing all these things finally come together. If you've spoken to me in the last few months, you've probably seen that energy or faith that I've been just not yelling, but saying pretty confidently. Because I mean, I know God is real, and I know God's gonna work. So I have that experience. So I'm just gonna like say like, it's true. And all of these three convictions have culminated into this one thing. This is the last thing I'm going to share about, and then until my conclusion. But basically, our company is like launching a research lab at the Greenmount Rec Center. We're collaborating with G-Rock, who's a church that serves Baltimore. And this is where college students work with professional engineers on professional projects together. And we work in the same room as middle school kids, and we help them with their homework. So the idea is that the middle school kids don't understand these like engineering projects going on, but the key is to give them role models and exposure to that at a young age, middle school, like before they go into high school, so they can try harder in high school. And most of these kids that are at the rec center, they just don't have any good role models to look up to. They don't have any friends or family who even went to college. And we eat with the kids, we show them our projects, we talk to them about college, and there's like a mentor relationship where we help them to achieve their goals. And all of this is going alongside the professional engineering projects going on. And the concept is that everyone will benefit, where the college students are getting volunteer and paid professional experience. Because I feel like volunteering is usually hard to sustain because people get burnt out and people feel like they're not getting anything out of it, so they stop. So I really want to think of something that people can actually continue to do and that everyone can benefit and not feel so tired. So our company benefits because it's good PR for the company. It's talent development, getting their name out there. It's a donation. So our company is actually really happy to support this. And the rec center loves our presence there, for us to be there for the kids. They really like us there. So everyone is benefiting here. And I feel like this whole idea is pretty crazy, and I never thought I would see it start to become a reality. But God has been doing so much.